everyone. In our first video discussing Mthwakazi restoration, we dealt with the historical background leading to the name Mthwakazi and how the territory today, which is part of Zimbabwe, was called Mthwakazi, which in the main today is Matabeleland, the region of Zimbabwe. We were discussing the attitude, and we had said we were discussing the attitude of the Zimbabwe Communist Party to the Mthwakazi question. We also dealt in the first video, which you can revisit in this YouTube channel, the attitude of politicians post-1980 in how they viewed the people of Matabeleland, or to use this term, Mthwakazi. In this second video, we want, as promised, to then give a Marxist perspective on our attitude as communists to the question of Mthwakazi. As we invited your comments, one comrade wrote to us and said we should have gone backwards in terms of giving our historical account, to say when King Mthwakazi arrived in the territory known as Zimbabwe today, who did he find in that territory? We thought it explained that they were the same people, or known as Abato, hence the name Mthwakazi. We did not want to deal in the main with the emergence of black states or African states in the early years or early centuries. As you know, there have been about 1,000 states under feudalism. We did not deal, which the comrade wanted us to do, to deal with the question of who built Kami, which is now known as Kami ruins. My sister, who has a YouTube channel, says, I was watching one of her videos on YouTube, says it was not Kami because she went to Kami ruins. Says it was called the Kami, because it was linked to milking a cow. I think it's Claudius Ndlovu. I'm not sure. I forgot her first name, but she's in Ndlovu. She does a lot of videos around tourism. So we did not deal with the question of who built Kami or Kami, as my sister Ndlovu would say. I am Ngabuto Nicholas Mapena, General Secretary of the Zimbabwe Communist Party. Please like the video, subscribe. Let's continue with our discussion. Please write to us so that we hear your contribution to this subject of Mthwakazi restoration. Now, as communists, we are guided by the Communist Manifesto as written by Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels. And it said, which I will call the first line, which defines who we are, defines the nature of our struggle, and also defines our attitude to the question of Mthwakazi or any other states, which we said are emerging states. The manifesto says, I quote, "The history of all hitherto existing society is the history of class struggles," close quote. That's what a communist party exists for. We are engaged as communists in class struggles. If the question of Mthwakazi has no relation to the class struggles, it is not for us as communists to participate in. We have elaborated in our political program, Completing the Liberation of Zimbabwe, to say we recognize the challenges that exist in the region of Matabeleland. We have also held a seminar in one of our Sunday prize, where Comrade Msebele, who is now Treasurer General of ZAPU, presented a paper on the national question. He was quoting Stalin on the national question, and the topic for the day which we're discussing, the question was, is Matabeleland or a regional question, or how different is Matabeleland question from the rest of the national question in Zimbabwe? And I came to the conclusion, which we agreed with him, that the Matabeleland question is not different from the national question. And we have said in the past that the national question is split into two components. I know that in some Facebook post which I posted, I did recognize that there might be a third component which is coming mainly from the comrades in the MDC, which we need to interrogate. I've been thinking around the third component, and I then came to the right conclusion that the third component, which the MDC comrades advance as a question of participating in the democratic elections, actually fits in the first component of the national question. And the national question is the question of belonging. So if you are talking in the context of the national question, and the first component that you must address is the question of belonging. Who belongs? Who is a Zimbabwean? If we are talking of a nation, uh, then from there you develop, because once you define who a Zimbabwean is, it follows that you must then discuss the rights of individuals or the rights of citizens, which in the main, it also includes the rights to participate in the electoral processes, resulting in a democratic government being elected. So the question that the comrades in the movement for democratic change are developing as a third component, and we want to argue in this channel that it fits in the first component. So in presenting his paper, Comrade Msebele then argues that the Matabeleland question or the Mthwakazi question is not separate from the national question, from the Zimbabwe national question, because when we talk of who is a Zimbabwean, it has to define all of us as citizens. We noted in the first video opportunism by the political leaders and their attitude. We quoted Mugabe, we quoted his wife and others in terms of how Mugabe would refer to the people of Matabeleland as the Nkomos people, which was in the main around an electoral question, trying to use the ethnic card to mobilize for electoral support. Now, the second component, which of course is defined by the Communist Manifesto, which I've just quoted, is this class question. Who controls the decisive means of production in Zimbabwe? Who controls the decisive means of production in Matabeleland? So that's when you are discussing the national question, these are the two components that you must deal with. And the Comrade Msebele, quoting Stalin in the presentation that he did in the Communist BRI or discussion group, came to the conclusion, which we agreed, that the question of Matabeleland is not different from the national question that we are confronted with today in Zimbabwe. Therefore, based on that, while we understand clearly the arguments from the Mthwakazi activists, but as the Zimbabwe Communist Party, we do not think that it is necessary in our view to create a separate state. And I want to demonstrate this. Because for a simple reason, let's also look into history again. Because we are now going in the next stage of human development. We will know historically that under primitive communism, there were no defined boundaries. Where people were nomads, so to speak, there were no defined boundaries under primitive communism. Where hunters, were gatherers, nomads would move from one place to the other. But the boundaries emerged with the emerging of the states under feudalism. And in Africa, there were about plus or minus 1,000 boundaries or states under feudalism. In Southern Africa, you will know the Zulu Empire, Basotho, Twagas that we are talking about, and many others stretching across the continent. There were about 1,000 under feudalism. But in the next human development and after feudalism, boundaries were redrawn. With the development of capitalism, and capitalism developed, in our case, alongside colonialism. And this is what Comrade Lenin addresses when he wrote his thesis on the right of nations to self-determination. He said, I will quote, throughout the world, the period of the final victory of capitalism over feudalism has been linked up with national movements for the complete victory of commodity production. The bourgeoisie must capture the home market, and there must be politically united territories whose populations speak a single language, with all obstacles to the development of that language and to its consolidation in literature eliminated. Therein is the economic foundation of national movements. And they went further, Comrade Lenin said, therefore, the tendency of every national movement is towards the formation of national states under which these requirements of capitalism are best satisfied. The self-determination of nation means the political separation of these nations from alien national bodies and the formation of an independent national state, close quote. So when colonialism developed alongside capitalism or vice versa, capitalism, colonialism, it then came with it the redrawing of new boundaries. And the first boundary, which was drawn, which you spoke about, the Jameson Line, which was then collapsed in 1893, leading to the Privy Council, British Privy Council of 1894 and 1898, which joined the two territories, which were created in 1890, collapsed in 1893 by the colonial power in what is now Zimbabwe. Therefore, if we are going to draw back the feudal boundaries, we are basically going back to where we came from. But the struggle of a communist party is to take us to the next stage of human development, which is socialism. So why would a communist party support the emergence of new states whose boundaries is premised on a feudal boundary? That because under feudalism, these boundaries existed, therefore, we must go back to the feudal boundaries today. When a communist party's key mission is to build a socialist society. So therefore, it means, as I move to conclusion, is that the communist party, a communist party, must therefore, as Lenin argued, therefore advance to a socialist state, dictatorship of the proletariat, recognizing that capitalism and colonialism split Africans in the main in different territories. And therefore, the agenda is to reunite the African people through what we call the reunion agenda. We will elaborate on the reunion agenda in the next video that we are going to do. And the other Marxists argued before us that workers know no country. Therefore, it means a communist party cannot support the creation of a borderline based on a feudal boundary. But a communist party, which is engaged in class struggles, must support the agenda of uniting the working class and the peasants for the elimination of a capitalist system and introduce or usher in a socialist economy or an economy based on socialist principles. This is what a communist party is about and it ought to do. So, in completing the liberation of Zimbabwe, the first step, as we have argued and as we continue to argue, is to build a national democratic economy based on national planning linked to devolution of power to the people. We recognize that ZANU-PF, which is not socialist, it claims to be socialist in its many documents, but which is not socialist, practices what is called ethnic patronage. It seeks to promote one ethnic group over the other, so that the ethnic groups remain divided. They will not unite against it. It has adopted the white secular regime attitude to divide the working class and the peasants. This is why ZANU-PF will bring in people not from Bulilima at the plant border post to work there. And naturally, young people who are not working in Bulilima will fight people of Mtogo who are working at the border post in Plumtree to say, why are we not employed? Why are the people in Mtogo employed in the Plumtree border post? Same thing with the Bedbridge border post. Young people in and around Bedbridge who are not employed will fight with the people of Mrewa who are employed at the border post in Mrewa. And this is the fight that is currently happening in South Africa, where ordinary South Africans, poor South Africans who are not working, are saying, why employ migrants in South Africa? Why employ migrants in restaurants? All of you who are subscribers to this channel, you will read the comments from our fellow comrades who are South African, who are saying we're tired of Zimbabweans. Why do you want Zimbabweans to drive Uber vehicles, as if South Africans are not able to do so? Now, what should then become the attitude of a communist party? The Communist Party must unite the working class and the peasants. It must not seek to divide along whether feudal boundaries or capitalist boundaries, for that matter, or colonial boundaries that were created, but it seeks to unite the working class and peasants to build a socialist economy. Therefore, as I conclude, the attitude of the Zimbabwe Communist Party towards the question of Mthwakazi and the other emerging states, as I quoted and I quote, the history of all hitherto existing society is the history of class struggles, close quote. But there are certain circumstances or special circumstances that a communist party might take a position, which will be a tactical position, by the way, to say, yes, as Stalin argued in Marxism and the National Question, I think he wrote it in 1913, and he argued that, yes, countries have a right, or nations have a right to self-determination. So a communist party based on a tactical question can support, as we do in Southern Cameroons, to say, for us to resolve the conflict, for us to end the killings, let Southern Cameroons or Ambazonia be an independent state, an independent republic. It becomes a tactical question. That does not therefore follow or mean that a communist party will want to create enmity with the working class in the other part of Cameroon. No. It is a tactical question to end the brutality against the people by the state of Cameroon. We've also taken a position in support of the Western Sahara, who have been colonized out of their free will, who have been colonized not out of their free will, who have been colonized by Morocco. And the position of the Communist Party is that Morocco must grant self-determination, independence to the people of Western Sahara. Comrades always say, Comrade Mabena, why do you support Palestine? Why do you support Western Sahara? Why do you support others across the globe and not support the call for Mthwakazi? And I want to conclude with this. The difficulty in Mthwakazi or Matabeleland, there's never been an agreement that indeed Matabeleland must be a separate state. There's never been consultation. There've never been dialogue. What we have heard is that individuals will establish political parties based on restoration agenda. They would then claim that they've been rigged by both ZANU-PF and the MDC when they do not perform well in elections. So the problem with that is that you establish a political party based on a restoration agenda without the mandate of the people. The only organization which has come close in terms of consulting in Matabeleland, but of course it has been hampered by, or its consultation